Добрый день.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good afternoon, dear guests. Today, the 2nd of November 2021, 13:00 Moscow time, and let me start the session of the dissertation committee dedicated to the defense of the dissertation by Ruslan S. Devyatov, seeking an academic degree of candidate of political sciences in the degree field 5.5.2 political institutions, processes and technologies on the topic adaptation of the public cultural policy into globalization challenges and by the act of Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University, Alexander Valentinovich Devyatov, dated the 27th of August 2021, number 8286/1. I, Alexander Vyacheslamovich Kurechkin, Doctor of Political Sciences, Professor, Interim acting Dean of the Faculty of Political Science, St. Petersburg University, was appointed chairman of this dissertation committee. The same decree establishes the membership of the dissertation committee. It includes Anna Vladimirovna Volkova, Doctor of Political Sciences, Professor of the Department of Political Governance, St. Petersburg University, Galina Isakovna Gribanova, Doctor of Sociological Sciences, acting head of the Department of International Political Process, St. Petersburg University. Our international member is Baltash Nurmuhamedovich Karipov, a Doctor of Political Sciences, Professor of the Department of World History and Social Humanities, Kokshetau University, named after Uali Khan of Kazakhstan. Also online with us is Rebecca Mikhailovna Wolfovich, and Doctor of Political Sciences, Professor of the Department of Public and Municipal Administration, St. Peter's Northwestern Institute of Administration, the branch of Russian Academy of Economy and Civil Service, under the President of the Russian Federation. Can you see and hear us? Yes, I can hear and see you very well. And the candidate seeking the academic degree, Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov, is also here with us. Also, the academic advisor of this dissertation, Doctor of Political Sciences, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Ethno-Socium and Inter-Ethnic Culture, Valery Ivanovich Yudin. Please, everybody, switch off your mobile telephones who are in this room, but the people who are online with us, please don't turn off your telephone, just turn off your microphone. I would like to inform you that audio and video taping, recording of this dissertation is ongoing, and it's broadcast live on the website of St. Petersburg University. It's accompanied by simultaneous interpretation from Russian to English and vice versa. At this moment, the main page of this dissertation committee session has an email where anybody can send their questions or comments that have to do with the dissertation or the presentation of the candidate, applicant, these questions will be relayed to me by the technical services, and I will read them during the discussion. I would like to emphasize that questions have to have a direct relation to the presentation of the applicant and the content of his dissertation. And please sign your question, including affiliation. No questions that have no relation to the dissertation or the academic discussion or anonymous questions will be read. In accordance with the procedure of awarding academic degrees of candidate of sciences or Doctor of Sciences established in St. Petersburg University by the acts of the administration of the university, a session of a dissertation committee is deemed legitimate if not less than 2/3 of the established membership of the committee is present, but not fewer than 4 people. We have 5 people on the committee. All 5 people are present, including 1 member of the academic council in remote mode with us. And we have a full audio-visual contact with the member. Therefore, the quorum is there. I would like to ask the member of the office for the support of our dissertation committee activities to start an attendance logbook, and we have the duration is about 2 hours. So the following agenda is offered. First item on the agenda is a short presentation by the chairman about the paperwork that has been submitted by the applicant. Questions can be asked on this, and the answers will not last longer than 5 minutes. A short presentation of the applicant that covers the key issues tackled in the dissertation, not more than 15 minutes. Please. Item 3, questions to the applicant strictly on the presentation, not more than 2 minutes per question. And I think even less that 2 minutes is quite long to formulate a question. Then number 4, answers of the applicant, the candidate, not more than 5 minutes per all questions. Then all members of the dissertation committee will take turns to assess the dissertation, and 10 minutes per speaker, and the chairman will have 10 minutes as well to review the dissertation, and the applicant will have 20 minutes to answer the critical remarks and questions. And there will be an open floor discussion. So the open floor discussion will be open to anybody, but which all questions or comments will not take longer than 2 minutes per speaker, and so this will be a short presentation of their positions. Some concrete questions to the applicant. strictly on the topic of the dissertation. All those willing to speak have to enter their name into the logbook and when speaking introduce themselves, including the degree and affiliation. And then the chairman will read questions, if any, that have arrived via email. And I would like to stress that written questions to read, which it would take more than 2 minutes, will not be read. Then the applicant will have the opportunity to answer such questions, 2 minutes per question. Then the academic advisor will have the floor to speak for not longer than 5 minutes. Item number 12 is the dissertation committee will have a chance to deliberate on the resolution to award or not to award the academic degree. With no mics on, the broadcast will be interrupted, and open roll call vote with the counting of votes by the chairman and entering the results into the protocol, into the minutes. Then the 14th, the verdict to award or not to award the sought academic degree will be taken, and the 15th traditional item, the concluding remarks of the defendant, not more than 2 minutes. Do we have any questions or the objections to? No objections, no questions. Therefore, I would like to turn to item number 1 on the agenda. Well, the dissertation of Devyatov Ruslan Sergeyevich, seeking an academic degree of candidate of political sciences in the degree field 552, Political Institutions, Processes and Technologies, on the topic, the adaptation of state cultural policy, was accepted for defense by the Act of Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University, dated 9 August 2021, number 7845/1. Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov wrote his dissertation at St. Petersburg University as a doctoral student, and his academic supervisor was Yudin Valery Ivanovich, deputy editor-in-chief of the magazine Ethno Socium and international and cross ethnic culture. The number of publications is 8. All of them were published in journals refereed and approved by the Minister of Science of the Russian Federation. All the paperwork it complies with the requirements of St. Petersburg University. They can be available from the personal file of the candidate, and the copies of these documents are available in this hall from the member of the office for the management of dissertation committee activities. who is present here. Do we have any questions? I will ask the members of this the station committee. Do we need to mention all the documents by name? No. I no need to do that. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to Ruslan Sergeyevich now. Dear members of the Dissertation Committee, and I would like to present my dissertation, Adaptation of the Public Cultural Policy to the Challenges of Globalization. Cultural flows traditionally occupy an important place in the politics of a modern state. However, in the context of globalization, their importance increases immeasurably. In the course of globalization process, the unification of patterns of behavior and lifestyles in different cultures takes on the character of a threat to the identity of individual national communities, and the intensive immigration leads to shifts in the consciousness of ethnic groups whose representatives move to a fundamentally different cultural environment. Competing concepts, a melting pot in which all ethnic groups, languages, and cultures must eventually integrate and assimilate to such an extent that they will identify in a sense only with the civil nation of the correspondent state, and multiculturalism focused on maximum preservation of cultural features of each individual ethnic group in the alien culture. They were unable to offer adequate solutions to problems arising in fundamental new conditions. The issues of preserving the historical and cultural heritage and the inclusion in the national culture of new types of creative activities which may radically differ from everything that existed before, isolation of mass and high culture from the general cultural landscape, ensuring access to the benefits of culture for all social groups, providing equal rights to all actors involved in the process, and creating conditions for their free creativity. These and many other problems are at the center of political discussions of our time. At the same time, it should be emphasized that it is a culture that is becoming one of the main instruments of soft power, increasingly determining the place and role of particular countries and global. All this testifies, in our opinion, to the relevance of the study. The object of the research is the public cultural policy, or the state public cultural policy in the conditions of globalization. The subject, political relations of developing modern societies in the process of making government decisions to reform the management of culture. The purpose of the study is to determine the main political factors influencing the process of making public decisions in the field of culture and art in the globalizing world. Research objectives: to determine the place and role of culture in the system of social values of the 21st century, to identify the basic changes taking place in the position and functioning of culture under the influence of globalization, to assess the influence of political factors on the process of determining and implementing a state cultural policy, to give a political assessment of the threats and challenges faced by various countries in an effort to strengthen their positions in the global cultural market. The methodological basis of the study is a systematic approach within which culture is viewed as an open system that actually interacts with the external environment. At the same time, changes in the external environment are associated with both globalization and the rapid development of the information society and digital technologies. In general, the methodology of the dissertation research was determined by the specifics of the subject of research, which made it possible, as necessary, to turn to those scientific methods that are the most effective ones in studying the issues under consideration, determined by the structure of the dissertation. Thus, the methodology used is a synthesis of various theoretical approaches to the study of the problems of public policy in the sphere of culture. Research hypothesis. In the context of globalization, countries striving to increase their level of competitiveness in the world arena are faced with the need to adapt their cultural policies to the imperatives of globalization. At the same time, for all the significance of globalization pressure on national culture, the state and its policy in this area remain the main actor determining the direction and dynamics of the process taking place in it. The novelty of the dissertation research lies in the following: an analysis of the causes of consequences of cultural globalization and the politics of a modern state, the substantiation of the contradictory nature of the changes taking place in the sphere of culture under the influence of globalization and their social political consequences. A generalization of the basic changes taking place in culture in the context of globalization, the dominance of medical corporations and the development of digital technologies, identifying the relation between the historical and cultural traditions of the country, the nature of the political regime, the state reforms in the field of culture and art, determination of the ratio of external and internal political factors to changes in the cultural policy of the state. The theoretical significance of the dissertation lies in the disclosure of the theoretical foundations of the transformation of state cultural policy under the influence of globalization, which in particular is reflected in the following: an analysis of the main theoretical approaches to the problem of cultural globalization, a determination of political determinants of decision-making on issues of state policy in relation to cultural art, identifying the basic contradictions between the objective need of preserving traditional culture and the development of new creative industries. The practical significance is in this study in the modern conditions associated with the awareness of the fact that without a systematic approach in solving the political aspects of reforming the sphere of culture arts, a clear goal setting of the planned changes, it is impossible to expect a systemic breakthrough in the position of national culture in the global market and an increase in its influence as a soft power tool. Based on the study, it is possible to develop recommendations for improving the public policy of the Russian Federation, adjusting the ongoing reforms in the country in the field of culture and art management. The results of the dissertation research can be sought after by the educational institutions in the development and delivering of courses in state policy and management, social policy, political sociology, and a number of other courses. The structure of the thesis is as follows. The first chapter has a theoretical and methodological character. The second chapter examines 4 cases: the state cultural policy of the Federal Republic of Germany, France, Japan, and Malaysia. The study made it possible to put forward the following provisions for defense. First, modern society is not just going through a transformation, but is going through a metamorphosis that forms a new, previously unknown society, generates process that humanity has not yet learned to manage. This requires the search for innovative solutions, many of which lie in the field of culture, broadly understood as a multifunctional and multimodal field of activity. Second, culture in the context of globalization ceases to be only an artistic reflection of reality and becomes an engine of the modern creative economy. Number three, cultural policy is increasingly gaining a global dimension, reflecting common global problems, dominant narratives, and geopolitical, economic, and social inequalities. In the conditions of the domination of the media industry and digital technologies, the process of cultural globalization is accelerating, understood as a transfer or spread of various forms of culture and art beyond national borders. Accordingly, more and more importance is attached to the formation of a positive image of the country's culture in the eyes of the ruling elites and public opinion in other countries that are at a similar or more advanced stage of development. Number five, under the influence of globalization, the political component in making decisions on cultural policy is constantly increasing, as evidenced by the growing activity in the area of main political actors, the state bureaucracy, business, cultural institutions, civil societies, and public opinion leaders interested in meeting their interests and requests. The growing tension between national, cultural, and artistic policies and the globalization of media organizations and industries leads to the exacerbation of relations not only in the domestic political arena, but also often becomes the subject of international conflicts, debates, and disputes. So these are the main key issues of my dissertation. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, please, you're free to ask them. Thank you, Ruslan Sergeyevich. I would like to stress from me, when I read this work, it impressed me because this is a very relevant subject. Is very relevant, and it doesn't happen very often in candidate of sciences dissertation, because this is an interdisciplinary topic, political science. This is a very relevant topic, very important. And therefore, I would like to say that probably members of the dissertation committee have some questions to you. Well, I have a question too. Dear Ruslan Sergeyevich, please tell me what are the reasons for choosing Germany, France, Japan, and Malaysia as case studies? Thank you very much. I would like to answer this. Russia is a country of a great culture, and the geopolitical position of Russia has traditionally been a multinational state, and therefore I would like to study the experience of developed leading EU countries, Western countries, but also Asian countries. Very interesting Japanese experience and very important and interesting Malaysian experience. And there are very many interesting things that I found, this experience can be used because it's very relevant for our country to make decisions on cultural policy. Galina Sakovna, your questions? Ruslan Sergeyevich, you, in your dissertation and also in your provisions for defense, say that in a modern cultural global policy, media corporations play a dominant role. The dissertation has many interesting facts about it, but I'd like to see your evaluation. Is it a curse or a boon? Well, we can view it from different perspectives, but the dominance of media country is both evil and good. For many countries where they operate, the good side is the increasing of capital in these countries and jobs in these countries, and the evil part is all media corporations work for mother corporations that are even bigger. They can influence the policy of a specific state, both internal and foreign. And I think that's my answer. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Alexander Velenshko, may I ask a question? Sure. Of all the countries that you analyzed, Malaysia was the most interesting case because this is a very exotic country with an experience that is very unique and least studied in European research, and even in Russia as well. I have a question. When you analyze the cultural policy of this country, you stress the influence of India and China on the formation of this policy and the verbalization. And would you elaborate on what you see as the need for India and China to influence Malaysia, so that their concepts of culture would be reflected in Malaysian cultural policy? Well, these are gigantic states, and of course India and China always have an influence on other countries, but why Malaysia? I've heard your question. I studied the cultural policy of Malaysia and the influence of the neighboring country on its formation, and my question is, Malaysia as Russia as a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-confessional country, and a very interesting case, just like Russia. China and Russia and India are neighbors of a large, well-developed country as Malaysia, such as Malaysia, have the interest there. It's a Muslim state. Malaysia hasn't stepped over a threshold of Islamization in general. Well, in Malaysia, there were riots when Indian and Chinese diasporas were banned to practice their traditions and festivals, for example, just as Uyghurs are suppressed, and in India, Kashmir, which is suppressed because they're Muslim, and Uyghurs are Muslims, and for both India and China, their main religions are different. Therefore, these countries are interested in Malaysia being a more secular state, and because 20% of Malaysian citizens are ethnic Chinese, and they are well-to-do people, and therefore China invests into the development of cultural policies. Hindu as the origin, people of origin is 10% in Malaysia, including when the British left Malaysia. The Islamic factor is the main factor why China and India are participating in in influencing their policies, Malaysian policies. Malaysia is taking great steps to unify their nation. Globalization is helping here. I think they're passing laws for every citizen to have access to education and to opportunity to improve their quality of life. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Sergei Sergeyevich, I have a very simple question. What do you understand as under globalization? It's a very complex concept. Maybe would you determine a period? So, thank you very much. Globalization, in a broad sense, it started with Columbus, Peter the Great, who brought many changes to Russia. Globalization should be viewed more broadly. We cannot put any particular limits on it. Globalization is taking place in every sphere of life. With our mobile phones, we receive information and acquiring the cultures of other countries and other social strata, leaders of public opinion readers, leaders, etc., etc. Thank you. So the second chapter is the cultural policy in the era of globalization. I think in the 20th century it expanded, and it's devouring the states and whole nations, and multinational corporations are the prime movers because in the United States, they're based in the United States, and their goal is to break down borders, national borders. This is the context in which I view cultural policy. Questions? Do you have any questions? One question. Maybe it's suggestion. It's been voiced. You used Germany, France, Japan, and Malaysia. You are a resident of Russian, the Eurasian Economic Economic Union. Maybe you should have maybe used another country of the Eurasian Economic Union, maybe for your doctoral dissertation, senior doctoral dissertation, you would choose this. Yeah, the EU is a well-developing union, association of states, and of course I have to include that in my research. Thank you. Would be interesting. Thank you very much, colleagues. Now we are moving to our next item on the agenda. That's the main probably item, reviews from members of the Dissertation Committee, in which they assess the dissertation, and therefore the applicant will answer the questions that are contained in these reviews and or defend against critical remarks. I'd like to, maybe the defendant will answer questions after each review, so that the critical remarks would not be forgotten. So I'd like to emphasize that no external reviews have been submitted for the dissertation. I will not therefore read any external reviews. I would like to remind our colleagues that all the reviews have been published, been there on the website. They've been there for a long time, and there's public access. Therefore, I think that there's no need to read out your reviews in full. Therefore, I would like you to focus on the critical remarks and questions and comments. Anything that Ruslan Sergeyevich has to address today. Do you have any objections now? Therefore, we are starting this procedure. Anna Vladimirovna Volkova, please. Dear colleagues, my review is on the website, therefore I'm not going to read it in full. I will just focus on the most important points, and then I will ask questions and voice my concerns. Well, this is a very relevant topic, and it's very good that within the political sciences we have such a dissertation, and this is an interdisciplinary research. Many people think about the end of globalization in the pandemic, but this is controversial. But different processes are taking within different nations, and I think this is a very correct point of view. This station is a rounded, original work, and has both advantages and shortcomings. And this is intertwined, and of course the work has a logic and a structure, and the logic is a good instrument to achieve the goal, and as well, the provisions are put forward for defense have very interesting ones. One is cultural policy is increasingly acquiring a global dimension that reflect general global problems, dominant narratives, and geopolitical, economic, and social inequalities. And this is very important to note in the modern world. And this is a problem that is quite acute and has been discussed for the last 2 years. The second one is it's under the influence of globalization. Political component of political decision making in cultural policy is constantly strengthening, and therefore and it is evidenced by the increase of activities of different actors, bureaucracy, business, institutions of culture, civil society, and public opinion leaders. And therefore, of course, the scientific and practical significance is that it discusses the foundations of transformation of public cultural policy under the influence of globalization. It's very, very relevant, and especially when we talk about soft power. The first chapter is theoretical and methodological one. A lot of work has been put into it, different treatment of cultural policy, of the concept of cultural policy. Different treatments are reviewed there. A great review of the literature, and I would like to a lot of these sources are in international languages, in foreign languages. This is a norm, and of course English and German, but it's not only in English and German, but it's also a very good systematization that we can see there of these of the studies and these sources. Area studies, cultures, and is is a very big component there. Comparative analysis of different cultures and the spread of cultures from Germany and France to Malaysia and Japan. On the other hand, of course, there are some drawbacks that we can discuss here. And first of all, I thought maybe some definitions would be relevant of such concepts as culture and cultural policy. Well, some consider these concepts as very narrow, in a very narrow sense, others in a broad sense, and I don't know what the author of Dissertation, which ones he adheres to. And for example, culture sometimes the culture with a capital C versus the culture with a lowercase c. So it's not only the arts, but also habits and traditions. And second, I think that the culture of a research should include the familiarity of the dissertations that have been defended in the same topic, in the same field, but we have lots of dissertations in political sciences, and this is and because this would give the text more flavor and more relevance to the academic research that has been done recently on the topic. There are some also technical drawbacks. For example, then whole passages are in Russian, and then in brackets in English, well, whole phrases. This is well, I don't understand why do we need the English translation. It's a strange way to make citations or to quote. And then there's some other problems with references to foreign language sources, but nevertheless, these drawbacks don't diminish the level of the dissertation, and the author published 8 articles in journals approved by the Ministry of Education and of Science of the Russian Federation. This is a great achievement. I think the dissertation of Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov on the topic, the adaptation of the public cultural policy to the challenges of globalization, meets key requirements established in the procedure of awarding academic degrees in St. Petersburg University, and therefore Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov deserves to be awarded the sought degree. Thank you very much. As far as the first question, I would like to say that the laconic formulation that culture is not just connected to the arts. This formulation is part of a provision for defense. That's why it's laconic. In that passage, it's expressed in a laconic way. And culture is understood in a broader sense. It cannot be understood in the narrow sense. As far as the lack of Russian sources in the in the index of citation, there are 17,000 works on the topic, the broad discipline. I've tried to study most of these studies, but maybe not all of them have been included. And I actually printed out a long list of dissertations that were published on this, defended on this topic. I would like to apologize for the typos and the weaknesses in citations, and I left some English translations. So this is just the apology. Thank you very much. It deserves only an apology. Thank you very much. I accept it. Okay. We continue. Nurika Mikhailovich Wolfovich. I will not read my review in full either. In the complementary part, I would like to emphasize the broadness of the scope of the station. This approach that was used by Ruslan Sergeyevich is very rarely used. It's a very daring endeavor to include in one text cultural policies of 2 major European nations and 2 Asian countries, which stand alone in the Asian landscape. Japan is an exceptional case of where the most educated and highly qualified population in the world resides, and this is a unique phenomenon. in a country where before the revolution had been a closed system, and in a closed system, as we know, cultures develop in a very tight process, and they hardly connect or integrate in globalization. And Malaysia, I have already mentioned, I will not reiterate. The problem that Ruslan S is addressing is interesting for me from the point of view of financing, etc., because in a classical sense, all products of a public system which a nation is divided between the ones influencing the quality of life and not influencing. With due respect to culture, this is not medicine, this is not healthcare, not water or gas. Primitively, culture doesn't influence the standard of living. Even in Germany, culture is not an absolute priority as far as funding is concerned. And Ruslan S is writing about new instruments in cultural policy to maintain and develop national cultures, to prevent the decrease of its potential, of cultural potential, and this is very important. And because I have some questions about the some mechanisms of formation of cultural policy, the author, I admit that the author is doing a lot to cover this. Lots of sources to draw upon, both documents and also cultural studies. In Malaysia and well, unfortunately, we don't have any documentation in the original language for Malaysia and Japan, although some of their documents are published in English too. As any reader, as an opponent of the author in this case, I have some questions on the dissertation. First one is this. On page 13, when you discuss the methodology used in the study, you say that you're using a synthesis of different theoretical approaches, but you never mention any other approaches besides the systemic approach. This position of the work needs further clarification. Number two, in the research, you use the following basic concepts as cultural policy and cultural globalization. There's a question, which of these concepts is more general? Whether cultural globalization is one of the trends of a modern cultural policy, or the cultural policy is determined and implemented as part of a cultural globalization. Third, Germany and France are antipodes in many respects. Historically, they've adopted different cultural policies. At the current, in the current era, do we see a convergence of both models, or do they follow their models independently? And the next question, what is the influence that modern development, sustainable development, was the influence of sustainability on cultural policy? Do we have a convergence of these two trends, for example, in the environment, whether it's a priority in the cultural policy, or cultural policy is a peripheral sphere which will be taken into consideration at the very last in the very last turn. And the fifth one, which pattern of cultural policy, model of person, is more suitable for Russia, and can the response of other countries be basic to improve the cultural policy in our country? Nevertheless, despite all these questions, I'd like to state that the dissertation of Ruslan S. Devyatov, an adaptation of public cultural policy to the challenges of globalization, meets all the requirements, all the key requirements at St. Petersburg University for awarding academic degrees, and Ruslan S. Devyatov deserves to be awarded the sought academic degree of political sciences, candidate of political sciences. Thank you very much. Your answers. Dear Rebecca Mikhailovna, thank you for your questions. First, we didn't put the enumeration of other approaches of the synthesis in this inclusion, because there's a paragraph for each. And first was the information revolution, a new approach to the cultural globalization, as treated as a cultural imperialism by some researchers, and a model of cultural flows or networks of the theory of recognition or perception. So these are the approaches, some of the approaches that were used in my dissertation, and therefore I used I used the term of synthesis. Second question. To answer this, well, there are two variants as the evolution of a concrete variant of cultural policy. Models of in the theory of there are different approaches that treat these concepts in different ways, and I think that it depends on which one we use. We can approach the answer of this. Germany and France, with all the dissimilarities, the paradigms of these cultural policies are similar. For example, this is dilemma between the evolution of national identity and incorporating such globalized trends as urbanization and migration, the assimilation of migrants and assimilating their values, and of course finding funding sources the need to find funding sources leads to integration of globalization and national interests. Leaders of the EU are trying to globalize within themselves these cultural policies in a similar ways. The fourth question, the sustainable development, which is formulated by the United Nations, is as a framework for all process for example, in assessing cultural policy, well, they have to cultural policy and sustainable development have to integrate between themselves, and because sustainable policy means that national traditions and cultures are integrated into globalized trends. What can be used for in Russia? Maybe we should combine different patterns, and in order to do that, we have to get a profound knowledge of what's happening in other countries, and we have to incorporate Russian culture into the global process. And Russia has always developed as the core element, that nation-building element. Russian culture is that cement that builds different ethnic groups, different local cultures together. And we have to use other people's countries' experiences. Have I answered your question? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Ruslan Sergeyevich. Next. Galina Isakovna, I will not read my report. I enjoyed reading this dissertation, but I will not formulate my assessment in a rigid scientific way. What interesting things or new things I have learned from it, or something banal is enveloped in some jargon. I think that we learned quite a few things. For example, choosing Germany, France, Japan, and Malaysia adds to the wealth of Russian political science. Well, we have studies on France and Germany, with Japan less, but Malaysia still less. This is something very new and very interesting, and from the point of view of the influence of external factors on their cultural policy. Nevertheless, I have some critical remarks for Ruslan Sergeyevich, and they are akin to what we have already heard. What this has to do with the formulation of the methodological basis of the research. The main concepts are outlined in Chapter 1, but you had to mention a comparative analysis because it was actually used throughout the dissertation, and this is at the foundation of Chapter 2. As a suggestion for future research, I would like you to pay attention to the concept of allomorphism. which posits that for a country to choose a cultural policy, this country views first global trends, but also the historical development of culture within the country. And we have a lot of that in the dissertation, but conceptually the tackling of this dissertation, the treatment is lacking. So why does the author exclude the United States, a country whose cultural policy corresponds to the melting pot and other? So, well, it's important. So also in terms of German and French cultural policies, you have to view them because in the context of the united single EU cultural policy. So you cannot disregard that. And in the conclusion, I would like to see conclusions or recommendations for Russia. Therefore, I would like to side with Rudyard Kipling. So, well, nobody knows about England, about England if they know only about England. The dissertation of Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov on the topic of adaptation of public cultural policy to the challenges of globalization corresponds to the main requirements, or meets the main requirements of the Act on the procedure of awarding academic degrees in St. Petersburg University, and therefore Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov deserves the third degree to be awarded to him. Thank you very much. Thank you. Your answers, please. As far as the methodology of the comparative is absolutely correct. Because Chapter 2 is one big analysis of cultural policies in different countries. As far as the concept of allomorphism, is very interesting one, and I will use it in my future research. Your second question regarding choice of countries. I consciously excluded the United States because over several recent years, globalization and Americanizations were equal. They were equated, have been equated, and cultural globalization has always, has been viewed as the Americanization of the world, but therefore the number of media corporations, non-American, well, the United States is the uses mega corporations as the movement, as the movers of globalization. And the American elites are against the involvement of the state in culture because they think that they suppress creative impulses and creative endeavors of individuals and inspiration. Therefore, there's no Ministry of Culture in the United States. Many American authors think that the United States have no cultural policy, but it's not true, because the American government is interested in culture, but there's a division into three parts of culture. Culture in anthropological sense, customs and traditions of a given nation. This is a chaotic process and the evolution of it, and it's not to be bordered. It's not. And the second one is mass culture. Is the product of cultural industry, is a sector of economy and governed by the free market. And the third one is mass culture, is the dominant global force. There's the Americanization of as a globalization as the Americanization. The next question. Germany and France, because despite Germany and France being members of the European Union, the European Union is exerting minimal influence on cultural policies in these countries, because this is done in a symbolic way, because culture is viewed as a unifying factor of the European Union, because the US never passed a cultural policy, a unified cultural policy. They stimulate different actors to engage in cultural policies. They have, of course, passed strategic documents, developed instruments. The European Parliament, the European Commission have been involved in it. One of the most important moments was the inclusion of the word culture in the European founding documents. But cultural policies are the prerogative of national states. And the cultural policy of the EU could be a field for separate research. As far as the recommendations for Russia, well, it's a very difficult issue, very difficult task, and maybe it can be done only after analyzing the cultural process of Russia. Maybe it wouldn't be viable to do this without such research. Thank you very much, Ruslan Sergeyevich. We continue. Dear Baltash Nurmagomedovich, your review. Dear colleagues, the process of globalization is not to be stopped. It has challenges and it brings about changes in all spheres of society. Therefore, we can talk about cultural globalization. Its global cultural development demonstrates tendencies to unify local communities, and the distribution of common values, norms, standards, ideals, and behavior models. And with positive, there are some negative changes. The work of Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov is based on different sources, deep, profound study, in-depth study of these sources. And my colleagues have already said about the theoretical and the practical significance. And so therefore I would like to say about just only about the drawbacks. The introduction has includes statements that are expressed in two general ways, and they don't reflect the depth of the study. In the first chapter, the main strategies used by different states in adapting their cultural policy to the imperatives of globalization are discussed, but an analysis of concrete countries from the point of view of these tragedies is never to be found. Or if it is, it's not logical. Unfortunately, when you chose specific countries, you didn't study Russia or the countries of the former Soviet Union as your examples, and this is a very rife material for study. In number 4, in the bibliography, the focus is made on foreign sources, but unfortunately there are no sources published in Russia or in the former Soviet Union over the last 2 or 3 years. Nevertheless, despite my critical remarks, the dissertation of Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov fully complies with the requirements of the procedure of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And therefore, Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov deserves the third degree to be awarded to him. The plagiarism clauses of this procedure are not violated. Thank you. Therefore, thank you very much, Baltash Nur Mohamedovich. Ruslan Sergeyevich, as far as the first question is concerned, the statements provisions put forward for defense, these are short snippets of the hypotheses that we defend or argue, the arguments we argue, but I'm going to take that into account in my future research. Second question, formulated in the first chapter, the main strategies used by the modern state to adapt cultural policy to globalization is the result of an analysis of political practices, and these are ideal models. Models are a reflection of reality. In the second chapter, when we analyze German and other countries' experiences, Russia cannot, well, every country draws upon different models and to formulate their cultural policy. Third question is fascinating to work on. We never set it as a task to study the cultural policy of Russia or the former Soviet Union as within a certain period. but I like this idea for my future research. As far as the fourth question, using different sources, that I already answered this question. This remark is taken into account. Very many sources. It's very hard to take account of every source, and we just selected only those who had a direct relation to the study, the subject of the study. Have I answered your questions? Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruslan Sergeyevich. And I am the only one and that hasn't read my review. A lot of things were said before me, both positive and negative, critical remarks, but I'd like to point out as positive the logic, good logic and the balance of the research work. It fully complies with both informal and informal requirements of building a dissertation or designing a dissertation. Well, I asked this question at the beginning. Interesting question, why you chose those four countries for a comparative analysis. The work is very relevant. It's not it may not be a pioneer work, but very rare in our field. Very specific study that it reveals the subject matter in such a good way. The drawbacks include the following. First of all, I would like to agree with Anna Vladimirovna regarding the existence of typos with this parallel translation into English on quite a few pages. I think these fragments of English text should have been removed. Probably the author has forgotten to do it. Quite a few typos. For example, there's a difference in the Russian version, 201 sources, and the English language. In the English language version of Dissertation, only 192 sources. Very modest approach, and the author didn't treat modern approaches to globalization. There are many treatments from economic and social points of view, and well presented in the literature. And you should have looked at the concept of new globalization by Richard Baldwin, and that focused on the problem of the labor market, and because he dissects the concept of globalization in a pioneering way and looks at globalization in a new way. The author should have drawn upon this work. A number of other publications translated into Russian from English since 2015. McGuire's work on media and others. Our colleagues from St. Petersburg University, political sciences, and Achkasov and Butrov and Allomorphism, Galina Isakovna have published quite a few papers on the influence of globalization on public policies and cultural policies. You should have included those, but the author said there are 17,000 works on it, so there are too many. But you should have put more emphasis on deciphering terms that you use. Should have focused on the analysis of the on utilization as a global trend, not from the point of view of global corporations or cyber security or democracy, but from a point of view of culture, from the point of view of communication, how it's changing now. The work was written before the COVID pandemic, but you should have included a couple of paragraphs about digitalization and distance learning and distance work. Of course, it's hard to evaluate what trends where they will lead, but nevertheless, I think that the author is confusing the object and the subject of study or research. In the presentation, he corrects it himself. He changed places between the subject and the object. So my question is removed. Of the more serious critical remarks, in some paragraphs have or lack conclusions from the author on these paragraphs. There are no conclusions on 2.2, paragraph 0.2, which makes these sections too descriptive, and it makes you wonder what the author thinks about all this and why this text is even there. Nevertheless, all these drawbacks and critical remarks do not influence in a critical way the quality of the dissertation, and therefore the work is as independent and original, and therefore the dissertation of Ruslan Devyatov, an adaptation of public cultural policy to the challenges of globalization, meets the key requirements of the procedure of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and the candidate, Ruslan Devyatov, deserves being awarded the sought academic degree of Candidate of Political Sciences in the degree field 5.5.2, Political Institutions, Process, and Technologies. The plagiarism clause is met as well. Ruslan Sergeyevich, the floor is yours now. Would like to apologize for the technical drawbacks for the list of literature and the these English fragments. As far as the theories, my goal was not to cover all the theories of globalization. I chose those theories that could be used could be used in the most effective way to describe cultural policy. But in the future, I will cover the other ones too. As far as digitalization, it is actively transforming contemporary culture. Many young people are used to personalized content and very interactive content. Museums are trying to involve the visitor in a new way with technology and IT technology, and in the pandemic there's been an acceleration of digitalization in analog sectors, such as the theater and other. They digitalize. They use hybrid models. But in different sectors, the ratio between online and offline will be different, because concerts and plays, theater productions will tend to be offline, of course, and also online development also is associated with the mental health of people. But new technologies will develop. For example, the video game technology in museums will be developing. For example, virtual reality in Moscow. Some concerts will be expressed as virtual reality, and the speed of the emergence of new formats is awe-inspiring. But it all depends on cultural goals, cultural goals. Political orientation stays the same, and as far as the fourth question is removed from discussion, the subject and object of study. You removed it from discussion. Well, as far as the fifth question, no conclusions after some paragraphs. This is unfortunately the result of haste, and they shouldn't have been overlooked. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ruslan Sergeyevich. I am satisfied with your answers to my questions. Dear colleagues, are you all satisfied with the questions, with the answers? Do you have any additional questions? No additional questions. Therefore, apart from besides the academic advisor, we have no visitors. Therefore, we have no questions. I would like to clarify, have there been any questions received online? No. Therefore, Ruslan Sergeyevich, you can take a seat. And the floor is now offered to the academic advisor of the applicant, Yudin Vladimir I am very happy to be here. This is a very relevant dissertation. Globalization is influence the economy and other spheres of life. Globalization and identity, and globalization influences national culture. The influence of globalization on national culture rouses heated debates. The originality of the work lies in the fact that the different, very different experiences are analyzed. It involves intercultural misunderstandings and culturalization of world conflicts. Countries and cultures are studied from the point of view of changes of cultural traditions that are often influenced by internal disagreements. We understand that culture includes social and economic changes, the concept, but we have to stress that very important conclusions were come up with as a result of the study. In most countries, there are moments when culture is on the rise, and culture stays and the different individuals try to influence and or try to bury culture, but it survives. All conclusions in the dissertation are well argued. Sergey Sergeyevich has proven to be a very good researcher and who has broad theoretical knowledge of political practices and has independent thinking skills, and we see in him an established scholar. and the dissertation includes the key issues of the tackled in the dissertation are reflected in 8 publications in very respected journals, and we submitted our papers to the committee of Standing Committee on Culture of the State Duma. Nevertheless, we weren't successful in the last. We didn't submit it to the previous State Duma, but we will do that. We will submit it to the new State Duma. The dissertation we unfortunately had to postpone the defense with the author of the dissertation. We fortunately made some typological mistakes, but not you, but the author of the dissertation did that. Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Do we have anyone would like to comment? Yes, Rebecca Mikhailovna. Dear colleagues, I have a suggestion. This discussion shows that all of us are very enthusiastic about our work, and we think that the applicant should expand the scope of work for the future. But unfortunately, this was not part of the goals of this dissertation. He was suggested to look at digitalization. This is a very relevant trend that needs to be studied, but as part of another work. I'm not talking about post-Soviet or Eurasian context. This is a completely new topic because the Soviet period needs to be studied in terms of cultural development. National platforms, but socialist in conceptual. So this is a very interesting topic, and I agree with it. And this topic can be offered to any political scientist, science doctoral student. But we all know that it's so hard to stay within the limits of the topic. And I think that it's very valuable that the author stayed within these limits, because had he deviated from the course, I cannot even start. I'm afraid to start thinking what would have happened. Out of what I read and what I've heard from the answers, I think that this is an optimum content because of course there's no ideal optimum scope. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca Mikhailovna. Any other? No. Yes or no? Yes, Rebecca Mikhailovna. In defense, yeah, you acted in the sort of in the defense of the applicant, but what I was saying is not to create a new dissertation, but to see authors' assessments, the authors' assessments, but not to expand the dissertation. Well, that was our take on the dissertation. Thank you very much, colleagues. I'd like to ask all members of the dissertation committee and the applicant, have you got any objections or questions as to the procedure of the dissertation session, in terms of technology, remote technology? No. Rebecca Mikhailovna? No objections, no criticism. Thank you. Dear colleagues, before we vote, we have a chance to deliberate behind closed doors the verdict. Do we need this break to discuss the results of the Rebecca Mikhailovna? No need. No need. I don't plan to. No multiple. No need. All right. Therefore, the colleagues have expressed their opinion that there's no need to declare such a break, and I agree with this opinion, and therefore I put to the vote the resolution to award Ruslan Sergeyevich a degree of candidate of political science, for an open roll call vote. When you vote in favor, you agree that that clause 11 is met, and I would like to quote this clause from the procedure, that all citations will be should be in the dissertation, and even the citations of the references to the author's own research, and it should be clear that the research that was cited is done in co-authorship or by him alone, by them alone. And therefore, also I would like to mention that not less than 3 members of the dissertation committee must vote in favor of awarding the academic degree for a positive resolution to be accepted. Anna Vladimirovna Volkova, my review was positive. The dissertation complies with the requirements, and the author deserves the academic degree of political sciences, political process institutions. Thank you. So you vote in favor of the resolution. Rebecca Mikhailovna, what about you? I also I like Anna Vladimirovna, that all the clauses are not in violation, and therefore this degree, the third degree, can be awarded to this to the candidate. So you vote in favor. I vote in favor. Yes. Yes. I'm in favor of awarding candidate of political science to Baltash Nur Mikhanovich. He deserves the candidate of sciences and political sciences. And I, as chairman of the committee, Alexander Vyacheslaevich Kurychkin, vote in favor of awarding the academic degree to Ruslan Sergeyevich. And I would like to announce, therefore, that out of the 5 members of the Dissertation Committee, 5 members have voted in favor of awarding Ruslan Sergeyevich Devyatov an academic degree of candidate of political sciences and political institutions, processes and technology. No one voted against and no one abstained. Therefore, this decision is unanimous. We congratulate Ruslan Sergeyevich on this outcome. This is not my first time that I have participated in academic committee work. I would like to say that all members of the committee have worked hard on preparations, and I'm impressed with Ruslan Sergeyevich and the preparation of the presentation and the answers that he gave. Thank you for appreciation of my efforts. 5 years have passed since I started working on it, under the supervision of my academic advisor. Well, it was the work was ready last year, but because of the pandemic, we had to postpone the defense. Rereading these paragraphs and points, sometimes some things look quite stupid, but you look at some things in different ways, in a different way. And I should have expanded some things, and so that Anna Vladimirovna would be more satisfied with the dissertation. Well, this is the beginning of a serious research endeavor, and this is a new world for me. And because I served in the army, I worked for different government bodies, and this is a new world for me. And I can see here, the more you learn, despite the age, and the more you see your mind developing, you're seeing the world in a broader, increasingly broader way, and I hope with your help I will develop. And thank you, Ruslan Sergeyevich. The session is closed, declared closed, and I would like the session broadcast.